Welcome to Ion Foxborough. I'm Karen Guregian. Today, I am pleased to welcome back former Patriots quarterback Brian Hoyer. Brian has been providing excellent analysis on NBC Sports Boston's The Game Plan each week, and he also hosts the Quick Snaps podcast with David Andrews, which I highly recommend to people to check out. Hello, Brian. How are you?
I'm great, Karen. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm good. I'm curious. I'm now a year plus into this podcast, so I'm
Mhm.
wondering how it's going for you.
It's been great, to be honest with you. It was kind of, I was, as I was realizing I wasn't going to play and I was planning out these media things. You mentioned the game plan on NBC Sports. Also doing Patriots This Week, I believe it's called, with Zolak and Bob
Oh,
Sochi
that's
down in
right. Yep.
Foxborough, which is
Yep.
was great. And then Sirius XM Radio. And then literally like 2 weeks before the season, I got a call from Ben Rawitz, who used to work for Tom Brady and is associated with Shadowline. He said, "Hey, we have an idea for a podcast with you and David Andrews." And I said, "I would love to do that." I mean, a guy who's not playing, a guy who is playing, kind of a different take on things, and really try to make it fun and kind of give fans an idea of what happens beyond the field, more like locker room talk. Obviously, we cover the games, but we also talk about some past experiences. We kind of have a throwback segment where we talk about a game that happened in our career, and honestly, it's kind of expanded. We had Patrice Bergeron on, obviously Bruins legend. We had Blake Griffin on recently, which he obviously finished his career here in Boston, but he's a huge fan out there. They have a whole award named after him on Pardon My Take, the Blake of the Year award. So it's been fun to do because I'm doing it with a guy I love, who I have a great relationship with, and the people over at Shadowline do a tremendous job producing it. And for us, it's just we get to show up, and we started off in person, and then David hurt his shoulder, so we went to virtual, which has been easy to do. And it's just as you and I are doing right now, it's very easy to do, and you can do it in long form. You're not having someone in your ear saying you got 90 seconds, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love the banter. Uh, when you talk about going outside the box too, I mean, you were talking about energy drinks last week
Yeah.
and arguing
Yep.
arguing over your favorite energy drinks. Well, anyway, I do think people should check it out. Um, it's probably a little more fun than my podcast here, but but you know what? Gronk was on last week, and we've had Gronk on before, and
Yep.
it's all good. Well, let's talk about what you always talk about too, the Patriots.
Hmm.
They're coming back from the bye week. They finally had a bye week, 14 weeks in. And I'm curious from your kind of outside inside perspective, what we should be looking for over the course of the final four games with a 3-10 team.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. I mean, this is this week that they had their bye week would be perfect if you're poised to make a playoff run, which pretty much every other team who had this bye week, along with the Patriots, it's like the Ravens, the Commanders, the Colts, they're all still in it. And so for the Patriots, you probably wish you would have had this about 4 or 5 weeks ago, so you could have really sat down and made some adjustments. It's so hard to do during the regular season because as soon as the game ends Sunday, you're already preparing for the next week. So to sit there and really, other than critique what happened in the game the day before, you're already moving ahead. So to sit there and do what we call self-scouting or self-analysis is very hard when you have a new opponent coming up. And so a lot of times I remember, specifically sticking with the Patriots, that week would be a lot of focusing on, okay, what do we do really well? We're going to continue to do that. What are we not doing so well? Do we get rid of it or can we correct it and move on? And so for them, this week I have to imagine is sitting down, looking and evaluating at what they've done really well, and then what can we do going forward? Maybe it's a little bit of a wrinkle in something we do that's going to give defenses a tough look as far as the offense is concerned. And also, I think for them right now, you kind of have to look at this as an evaluation period. You know, you're not going to the playoffs. You know that there's going to be a lot of turnover on this roster. You're going to have to let guys have opportunities to go out, prepare, play in the game, and see how they respond because you have to make a decision on who's going to be on the team next year. We all know that Drake Maye is going to be on the team, Christian Gonzalez, Duggar, Peppers on Wayne, like the core guys, you know who's going to be there. But the young guys who maybe have an opportunity to use this next 4 games as basically an audition, not only for the Patriots but for the rest of the league, because I look at just for example the young receivers, Jalen Polk, Jovan Baker, Booty. Those 3 guys should play a lot over the next. I'm not saying you don't play Kendrick Bourne, you don't play Pop Douglas, but you need to constantly rotate them through because you see there's times where they do it and then maybe they mess up and it's like, all right, we're still trying to win the game. You're
Hmm.
not playing anymore. But I think now you have to use this as an evaluation and justify whether you want to continue to develop these guys or you're going to go look in a different direction, whether that's in free agency or the draft. So I think that's the big thing is look, do they want to win more games? Of course. You never tank. I know I had to answer this at a Q&A at the stadium a few weeks ago. There's no such thing as tanking. There's an evaluation period. So you're going to put guys out there who maybe aren't going to perform as well as what you might expect, but you have to see what you have in these players in order to really go into the offseason knowing what your plan is at certain positions.
You've been in this type of setting before with other teams, teams that, have sort of been
Hmm.
out of it with, a few games left. Is it tough to keep those guys motivated or guys basically still kind of playing for jobs? Is that the motivation?
I think you see a little bit of both. I think the guys who maybe are established know that they're going to be there. Maybe they're starting to plan their vacations. Maybe they're doing those things. But the guys who are hungry, who are trying to make a name for themselves, whether I said like it's for the Patriots or for the other 31 teams in the league, you're gonna grind all the way to the end. And honestly, the only times I've been a part of teams that you knew you weren't making the playoffs, it was the years that I was on injured reserve. So I wasn't around as much, but you could get a sense of who's in it till the end and who's either looking to, I'm a free agent coming up. I'm just trying to make sure I don't do anything to get myself hurt, to make myself look poor. But there's guys who are going to, at the bottom of that roster who realize I'm going to get an opportunity here and I can't let that opportunity pass me by. So there's a little bit of all of that. I think, that's just being a professional athlete and trying to take it 1 week at a time, not look 4 weeks ahead. And I mean, similar to Las Vegas last year when I was out there, we had a bye week. I think it was the same week the Patriots did. And we were still, I mean, when you look at the statistics, you're still in the hunt, but you realized it was going to take a lot. And then I think we lost one of those games right off the bat coming out of the bye week or whatever it was. And you realize you weren't making the playoffs. And so at that point, that's when it begins about like guys are going to get opportunities and you have to see what you have. And I think that's what those guys down in Foxborough have to do because there's certain positions where you're going to have to improve. And if you can get something out of the guys that you drafted this year, last year, whatever it might be, maybe that doesn't become such an emphasis in your offseason priority.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it. The wide receiver story is far from being told because I mean, we've seen Booty come on this year, but Polk and Baker
Yeah.
have just, because of mistakes made, they take a seat, but you sort of need to see, are they going to get over these hurdles, you
Right.
know?
Yeah, and that's important to do because okay, look, I love Kendrick Bourne and I think he's a great professional wide receiver and he's come along and he was battling back for I mean, I was shocked that he came off a PUP and played that first week. I mean, I tore my ACL and I played quarterback and I had a whole offseason to get back to it. I couldn't imagine coming back in the middle of the year and playing wide receiver. I mean, the way they cut, the way especially the way KB runs his routes, I think you know what you have in KB. He's a solid receiver, possession guy. He could have a game where he goes for 100 plus yards, but he's going to be a consistent guy. And I think Drake's starting to learn that. You see it more and more each week, the consistency of throwing the ball to Kendrick. And Pop is a slot receiver, so you know what you're going to get from him. Those 2 guys, I think you already kind of know going forward what it's going to be. The other guys, it's just the inconsistencies. I mean, Booty has had some great plays, but then he's had a lot of bad plays. And then the other 2 guys, I mean, they can't even get on the field long enough to be able to evaluate them, which just tells you what the coaching staff think about them. Because it really, and this sounds crazy, up until a few weeks ago, the Patriots could have made a run. I mean, they played the Colts a few
Yeah.
weeks ago, and I look up and it's like Colts are still in the hunt. And you kind of find that hard to believe, but a few games go a few different ways, and you're still playing for an opportunity, a small opportunity to make it in the playoffs. Now that you know that that's gone, I think it's time to you got to say, all right, we're gonna have to see what it is, the good, bad, ugly, all of those things, and we're gonna have to evaluate those guys. And I know I'm kind of focusing on that position. There's probably other areas you can
Mm,
too, but I
mm,
guess offense is more of my expertise in which I'm really trying to
yeah.
break down and analyze.
Um, Speaking of your expertise, I was talking with Jalen Polk last week, and you know what we saw in training camp is different than what we've been seeing here during the regular season, and obviously it's a whole different thing in terms of hitting and so on and so forth. Um, he was, talking about chemistry that he has with Drake May. And he goes, God, if at practice it's great. And he just hasn't been able to translate that into games. Have you played with receivers where, it's great for you guys in practice and then it hasn't quite hit the field? I mean, can you see that happening?
I mean, look, I was like the N'Keal Harry whisperer. Whenever I was in practice, it was my responsibility to try to get N'Keal going. And we had great, I mean, and honestly, when I came in the games and some of those end of those games, and I think it was in 2021, Max rookie year, like I had a lot of connections with N'Keal. Sometimes it's about when you have the opportunity, you have to be consistent with it because once you show the consistency, you're going to be out there more. And the more you're out there, the more opportunities you're going to get. And I think what has happened is the inconsistency has caused the coaching staff to have him out there less, which means you have less opportunities. And then when you have that one opportunity, if you screw it up, now your opportunities go down. I mean, we listened to Tom Brady talk about this when he was in college at Michigan. You know, at first I had 3 reps and then I did really well with 3. So and then I got 5 and then I got 7. But the reality is if you get that 7 and all of a sudden 4 of them are bad, well, now you go back to 5. And so I think that's what it is. And look, I don't I wish for all of these guys success, but when you're sitting here having to analyze it, you see the inconsistencies, you see the lack of detail, attention to detail, the small things, which then add up to be the big thing. So there's a lot of times where those young guys and I've seen multiple instances where they're running a route concept that I know pretty well, and I can guess what's being called, and I know where Hunter Henry is. And I know that Hunter most likely is probably not wrong in his spacing. But then I see someone else that's running right by him, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna assume that Hunter's not wrong because I see that the idea of the concept they're running, and these other guys, it's like they go out there and don't think that anyone else is out there running a route with them. And there's been some times where they've gotten better, but I think that's the one thing you've seen, and this is where I think Drake has matured so quickly is he realizes the guys he can rely on. It's Hunter Henry, it's Austin Hooper, it's Kendrick Bourne, it's Ramondre Gibson, and Pop Douglas every once in a while. I think that's a tremendous sign of a quarterback who realizes, and Tom used to talk about it. Now, this is we're talking about two different things, but he's like, if I don't trust you, we might as well be playing with 10 people out on the field because when you get in a game, there's only so many opportunities, and the ball can only go to one person at a time. And so, if you're not sure how a guy's going to do something, or if they're not in the right place all the time, you're going to start to lean towards the guys who do it the right way.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Drake. Is he obviously number 3 overall pick, highly touted, young?
Hmm.
He came in, people said there was a lot of work he had to do on this, that, and the other thing. Is he, in your estimation, better than you expected? Or what did you expect, when you
Yeah.
finally saw him play?
Well, I think everyone said, "Oh, he's so raw, his footwork, this, that." And with all due respect, those people don't always know what they're talking about. And so when I've watched it, there's times where his footwork isn't so great. But I've seen the thing that I've been impressed with is the um, concerted effort to clean that up as the season goes on. I mean, what I expected was about how he played in the first game. There's going to be flashes of great plays, but there's also going to be some leaning on his athletic ability, raw. But the intentional improvement each and every week in the middle of his rookie season, I see it each and every week. There's things where he won't do it the right way. one week, and then the next week it comes back up, and he does it, and you can see in his mind, okay, don't rely on what I've done my entire life and run out of the back of the pocket. Step up in the pocket. So against the Colts, he steps up in the pocket and he has a 41-yard run. Whereas I think if that play is the same play in his first week of playing, he tries to outrun the defensive end and either has to throw the ball away or get sacked. I mean, we saw it happen in London. And the one thing that I love about him is his mentality and the way he gets up there and owns everything, has a great accountability for a young guy. And I think his mentality has allowed him to exceed a lot of expectations, which I think he has high expectations. As you mentioned, he's the third pick in the draft, but no one really knew this wasn't Jaden Daniels, who had played 60 games in
Yeah.
college, or even Caleb Williams, who won the Heisman Trophy winner. You were kind of drafting him off of potential and what he could be. And I think the thing that I've been most impressed with is he continues to improve each and every week. Now, there's going to be times where, it kind of falls back down a little bit, but he continues to get better. In his last two games, I think at home, were back to back the best games he's played. And I think you just see the comfortability, the ability to throw in rhythm on time, the touchdown pass to Austin Hooper. He's letting it go with anticipation, which you didn't see a lot of that his first few weeks. So it's to see the growth each and every week. I think that was people's biggest fear, is that he was just going to stay where he's been and rely on his athleticism, rely on a big arm, all of those things. But I think what's such a great sign is he's not just relying on those things. He's working each week to get better, whether it's in the pocket with his decision making, all of those things. And then I think this is going to be the fine balance. And you've seen it with guys who have athleticism, is how do you curb that without taking it away from him? And I think he's done a tremendous job each week of knowing when to use it and when to just drop back and play quarterback.
Um, does it surprise you at all that at 22 years old, he has, some of those traits you can't teach, whether it's like anticipation or whether it's throwing guys open, which we've seen.
Hmm.
Do any of those things kind of surprise you, that him being so young, that he's already kind of ahead of the curve, perhaps, with some of those things?
No, the physical things, I'm not surprised, because I think he's a very talented athlete. So that's going to come with experience. You're going to get into I remember, the first time, whether I was a rookie or the first time actually playing and realizing, oh, I have to throw this ball into a window with some anticipation, or else it's not going to be there. And I think you learn that with experience, and the physical part of it kind of um, you either have it or you don't, and you adjust to it, and you keep adjusting, and you keep understanding, okay, this is what the NFL level is. The thing that I'm most impressed with is the mental aspect of it and the way he handles everything. And I think when you look at it, his dad was a quarterback. He was the youngest of all these boys who beat up on him, kept him humble. I mean, his humble, aw shucks leadership and the way that guys talk about him tells me a lot. And I've met him a few times and talked with him, and I've always come away being very impressed of, 22 years old. There's a lot on his shoulders, and it doesn't seem to phase him one way or the other, which is a great sign. And I think he's hungry to be really good, and he's got good people around him. Obviously, Jacoby Brissett being in, he's talked about it multiple times, and I know Jacoby really well and the type of person he is. So having a guy like that in the room, TC McCartney, I think Alex Van Pelt's done a tremendous job um, realizing what Drake does really well and then building the offense around that along with the other players. And so I would say when Drake took over and then played a few games, you saw the offense really shift a lot more in the shotgun, a lot more 12 personnel, because I think he realizes Drake's very comfortable with Hooper and Hunter Henry, two tight ends. For those who don't know what 12 personnel is, one back, two tight ends, two receivers. And so I think AVP, I mean, in early in the year, people were giving him a lot of crap, but I think the idea going into the season was, let's play smart, let's run the football, let's not turn it over. And look, they won the Cincinnati Bengals game that way, and then they almost won the Seahawks game that way. And then after Drake played a while, it's like, all right, we got to let this guy be athletic. He's more comfortable in the shotgun. That's the one thing I think he'll need to work on in the offseason, is being more comfortable under center, because it's very hard to get a running game going when you're in a shotgun a lot. So I think that's one thing you've seen, but he's been able to handle it, and that's why they've had success offensively. And then another big step will be more successful in the red area, because that's in the NFL, that's the toughest part of the field to be able to score in.
You you mentioned Drake needing more work under center. Is there anything else, other areas that you see that he really needs to refine or get better at again to elevate his play?
Well, I think, like I said, you've seen improvement in the footwork. And what does that mean? I mean, it means a lot of different things. But to me, when I watched him coming out of college, it's he gets very narrow, which you don't want to be too narrow because then you have to overstride to throw. But he's narrow because he's athletic and he can get away with it. And so you see him trying to improve on that. And sometimes when he gets to the back of his drop in the pocket, he tends to drift a little bit. But now he's starting to learn to push up. And this is all I remember, and I didn't even play more than just mop up duty my rookie year. But when you hear Gerard say like the biggest jump is from year one to year two, whether it's playing, coaching, whatever it is, that's true because when you go into it, it's a whirlwind. And yeah, you're trying to work on all those things. Not to mention if you're a rookie 22-year-old playing each and every week, yeah, in your mind, you might work on those things for a few minutes before you get into the game planning part of practice and all of that. But after the season ends and you get away from it for a little bit, you can sit there and analyze it and think it through. It's kind of one of those things like it kind of sinks in. And when you come back, you realize, okay, now I have this entire off season. Let me pick on a few things physically that I can improve on. Having a better base. When you get to the top of your drop, don't drift. Hit the back of your drop, start to push up immediately. All of those things, I'm sure, are things that he'll work on once the off season comes around. But during the season, you guys come out for practice for warm-ups and individual. I mean, after that, practice is going. You're doing group run, you're doing 7-on-7, you're doing team. There's not a lot of time to work on individual fundamentals. So you get maybe 15, 20 minutes, and then the rest of it is practice where you're going against each other. And so once you get done with the season, you get a time to kind of recover, refresh, understand, okay, what did I do well? What do I need to improve on? You come back in that off season, you have a really dialed in plan on what you need to work on. And that's where those big steps of growth come. And I think the one thing about the quarterback position, the longer you play, the more you see, the more you understand. I know he talked about wanting to understand defenses better. That's going to come because now he's going to have a whole year of film to sit there and watch and say, oh, I played against so and so, and they ran a crazy version of Tampa 2. I didn't really understand it, but I see where everybody's getting to certain spots. So it may not be the typical where they're two safeties high and a Mike linebacker down the middle. They're kind of doing it in a different way, but it's still Tampa 2. And now I know the areas that I can affect on that. And so I think those are things that will come in the off season. Right now, it's like, Bill always used to say, like, you're going in the train tunnel and there's no light at the end of the tunnel. They still got a few more weeks until they see that light. And then you can really work on those individual fundamentals a lot more in the off season.
I want to pivot briefly to Gerard Mayo and how he's done in his first year as a head coach. He's taken a lot of grief,
Hmm.
fans who kind of already think he should be one and done. I don't think that's going to happen. But what do you make of his first year as a head coach?
Yeah, I think it's a learning experience. I think, look, the NFL, the most judgment always comes down to the head coach and the quarterback. That's just what it is. And for us in those positions, that's what you sign up for. And I think Gerard is learning the same way that Drake's learning. And he's obviously he played for Bill and then coached for Bill. But when you get put in that position, that's your first time doing it. And so there's a lot of things that he's learning on the fly doing. But I know Gerard, I know the character he has, the person he is. I have nothing but full confidence that he will learn a lot from this year. I think the biggest thing is getting the roster to the point where you want it to be. And I know they had an off season this past year, but it kind of was, becoming the head coach. Elliott gets his job title. Okay, what are we going to do? I think a lot will be said about how they handle free agency and what they do in the draft because the one thing I do look at. I don't think the Patriots are that far away when it comes to the roster. They have a lot of great key core pieces, young guys. I think you add a few elements on both sides of the ball. And like I said, woulda, coulda, shoulda, but there's a few games that the Patriots definitely should have won this year or could have won, and they would technically be in the playoff hunt right now. Now, I'm not saying they would make it, but you could be 5-7, 6-6 right now, and it wouldn't look as bad. And I think
The outlook would be different. I
it
mean,
would.
it's like 7 one-score games. So
Right. And a lot of times when you have a new coach and a young team and guys that aren't typically used to doing those things, it takes some time to realize how to win those games. And I think the Patriots have, Bill always used to say, you can't win until you keep from losing. They've hurt themselves in a lot of those games with penalties, with turnovers, things of that sort, or just even last week against the Colts, all you got to do is stop them. They couldn't get a stop. There are certain things that take time to understand and to get the right people in place to do those things. And the one thing I know about Gerard is his work ethic, his understanding of football, and I know he has a vision for this program as well. And I think I'm not trying to make comparisons, but you look at a Dan Campbell, who I think his first year they won 3 games, and you look at where they're at now. I think that's the model you have to take. Now they handled the draft and free agency very well, and just having those different additions can make a big difference. You have the quarterback, you have one of the best corners in the NFL, you have two tight ends that will be great and solid for your young quarterback. You need to figure out the wide receiver position, the offensive line position, and then defensively, one pass rusher and maybe a free safety, a guy who's a true free safety. That right there could equate to 4 or 5 more wins just by handling those positions the right way.
As a player, how important or not was, especially for a team like the Patriots, is kind of the momentum you build in this, say, in this final month?
Sure.
Does it mean something again to a rebuilding team? I mean, I know it did uh, Coach Belichick's first year,
Hmm.
Coach Parcells' first year, when, things started slowly and then they picked up steam and momentum, and that carried into year two. How important is that element of momentum over these four, final games? It might not be wins,
Yep.
but it's like maybe how you play those games or how competitive they are.
Yeah, 100%. I don't look, unfortunately for them, the last 4 games are not very easy. They're all pretty good teams. Um, I think the way they play, and this is like a big thing too, is for the coaching staff, for the front office, you're going to see who plays hard till the end. You're going to see who are the guys, not just based on their physical play, but the attitude they bring, the culture you're trying to build. Who fits into that narrative? Who's gonna fight all the way to the end, whether they win, lose, draw, whatever, and who's gonna kind of coast in, kind of cash the check and be ready for whatever's next. So I think that's a huge part of it. And I think if you fight hard and you play to a certain standard these next 4 weeks, whether you win or lose, that sets a tone and precedent for what you're going to do next year, especially for the guys that will be returning. So for the players that I just mentioned that are going to be back, how did these guys basically use these next 4 weeks as establishing, let's call it the base foundation for what's going to be next year. So it's definitely important. I think maybe getting away from football for a week, especially after it's been a rough year, having the bye week, you come back refreshed. Now, there's times where we've come back from the bye week, even when we had good teams, and it's tough, especially after you've had a routine for 14 straight weeks. You may not have a great week of practice. Okay, so how do you overcome that? We heard about Drake kind of addressing the offense a few weeks ago when he felt like practice wasn't going well. So you're building on everything. And I think if you can use these next 4 weeks to continue to build and not slide back, that'll be huge going into next season.
Hmm. You've brought his name up a couple times, Bill Belichick, and as of this taping, there's been no news with the North Carolina job, but all you're hearing now is it's a serious, a serious thing. Can you see Bill coaching in college?
I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but who know? I mean, maybe it's time for him to try something different. It was funny watching the Fox Bros on Fox yesterday, and they were kind of getting asked about it. And Tom did a great impression of Bill trying to recruit high school kids. I mean, like, look, you can come here if you want. I mean, we don't really need you, but if you
Yeah.
want to, I mean, it would be maybe it would be totally different. He'd have to take a different approach to it. The also thing that doesn't make a lot of sense to me is how many wins is he shy of, winning in this NFL record. So obviously, if you commit to North Carolina, like, what does that do for that NFL? Um, opportunity. So it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, I read some reports about, Steve being named like the head coach in waiting as part of the deal, which I can see that, doing that for your son and making sure that he's established and has something lined up for him too. So, look, we've all, I mean, I shouldn't say we've all, but we've gotten to see a different side of Bill, obviously. Everyone here in New England, we're so used to seeing him in post-game press conferences, but now he's doing the media, he's all over the place, and for the rest of the world, get to see his little bit of dry humor that we were always accustomed to in some of those team meetings, and it's amazing because he's everywhere. You get to see him on the show with Ocho Cinco and Chris Long and Ryan Clark, and then he's on the Manning Cast and the podcast. I mean, it's literally, I mean, insta face as he would like to say. So, yeah, it's been fun to watch him in that role too. So I mean, look, we're gonna have to sit here and wait and see what happens.
I would like to end the podcast by stealing something from your
All right, I like
Quick
it.
Snaps podcast. I believe it's at the end that your producer asks questions
Yeah,
or poses questions to you and David. So I'm gonna pose. I didn't prep you. Sorry
yeah,
about
I
that,
love
but
it's all right. It's
I'm just
better that way.
I'm just gonna throw them out at you.
Okay,
Okay, five quick
all
ones.
right,
Outside of football, what's the best sporting event you've ever attended?
okay. Let's think. I'm honestly gonna go with the Stanley Cup final here in Boston. Was that 2010? It was when I was young during my first stint, and
Yep.
that was incredible. That was really cool. I'm fortunate to say I've been to NBA finals, I've been to the World Series, I've been to the Stanley Cup, and obviously been in a few Super Bowls. But that Stanley Cup final was rocking, and hockey just I didn't grow up a big hockey fan, but being there in person and watching these guys play and the intensity they play with and the way the crowd was going, that was pretty incredible.
Um, do you have a favorite NFL uniform? And it doesn't
Mm.
have to be one that you've you've been in a few, but do you have a favorite?
It's hard. I'm kind of torn between like the new school, the new uniforms and the throwbacks. Like I think they should just every team should go to a throwback because the Eagles, the Broncos, the Patriots, the Dolphins, the Titans when they wear the Oilers. I mean, those are all the uniforms I grew up with, so I love those. I honestly think the Pat the Patriot red jersey it doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that
Yeah.
one.
I mean, when there's so many teams that have the creamsicles for the Buccaneers, I think the NFL should make like, a season where everybody just wears throwbacks unless you're a team that never had any.
How about favorite sports movie? I don't know if you're a movie guy or
Mm,
you take your kids to
love
movies.
movies. We're big
And
Marvel. We love the Marvel movies. My son and I, that's like our thing. But for my sports movie, it's got to be For Love of the Game with Kevin Costner.
Hmm.
Yeah, I love that one. Just the flashbacks of his entire career along while he's going through this last game and the way that he handles with the pressure and things like that. I love that one. And then I guess if I had to go football movie, maybe Little Giants. I love that
Oh,
one as a kid and watch it with my son now.
mhm. That's
Yeah.
cool. All right, last two. Is there a coach that you wish you got a chance to play for but didn't?
All right, I'm gonna kind of cheat on this one because I played for him. It was only 3 weeks, and I've said this throughout my career and to this day now, even covering him. But Mike Tomlin, and like I said, I was only there for 3 short weeks. It was my first, I got cut by the Patriots at the end of training camp in 2012, and I was out of football for 10 weeks.
Yeah.
And I went in to the Steelers. Roethlisberger had been hurt, Byron Leftwich had been hurt, so Charlie Batch was going to start. They needed someone to back him up. Went in, worked out. It was me and Mike Kafka, who I think is the offensive coordinator
Yes.
in New York now. And they chose me, and I was there. And I just remember that was my first experience in the NFL, not being coached by a head coach of Bill Belichick, which I thought that's how I just thought that's the way it was. And I walked in and Tomlin's team meetings and at practice, and the way he handled the team, I thought was tremendous, which is why he's had 18 straight winning seasons. And then last week for my serious show, we were going to talk about the Hard Knocks, which I try not to watch because I lived through being on Hard Knocks in 2015, and it was miserable. So I try not to watch it. But the in-season one was pretty cool, and they had Tomlin on there, and it just reaffirmed everything I remember thinking about the guy and just the type of coach he is. He's a motivator. But he keeps it real. And there was a moment where the first play of the game against the Bengals, I think George Pickens, the receiver, slips and it ends up being a pick six. And he's all, upset and he walks over and Tomlin puts his arm around his neck, pulls him in close and says, "Hey, that's not going to determine the outcome of this game. Let's move on. We all got your back." And I was like, man, I didn't have a lot of head coaches that were like that, but that kind of reminded me of the time that I was there. And just, I think you see the way the players love him and the way they play is why they've been so consistent over the years. I know they haven't won all the Super Bowls like the Patriots may have, but they're in it every year. And I think that's all you could really ask for.
Mhm. All right, final one. A receiver that you wish you had a chance to throw passes to.
Uh, it's a tie between Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. These guys are, I mean, I can't believe that they were on the same college team and Joe Burrow got to throw to both. They're incredible. And look, I got to throw to a lot of great receivers. Obviously we're all praying for Randy Moss and what he's going through, but I remember as a rookie, I got thrown in at the end of the year, completed a pass to Randy, and I came into halftime. I was like, man, I can't believe I just threw a pass to Randy Moss. He was like, shit, well, keep him coming. I mean, that was just Randy. And
Yeah.
then I got to play in Houston with DeAndre Hopkins, who obviously a phenomenal receiver. Devontae Adams last year, incredible receiver. Obviously Julian, who I came in with, and to see what he made of himself was incredible. I mean, Josh Gordon was one of the most talented guys I ever played with, but these two guys from LSU, it's like whenever they get the ball, they're looking to score, and they've done a tremendous job, and um, they're a lot of fun to watch. So those are two guys that I would have loved to throw in the ball to.
Well, thank you, Brian. That was great. And obviously, I think people should check out your podcast and wherever you happen to be.
A lot
it,
of places. I'm figuring it all out. So
well, thanks so much.
thank
And
you.
we'll see what happens the rest of the way.
All right. Thanks, Karen.